Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second stream for the My First Game Jam. What today's going to be, we're just going to kind of look at kind of some basic things about game logic and just kind of how games work in general. And then after that, we're going to take a brief look at Kaboom Js and just kind of have some fun with it. I know tomorrow is scheduled for Kaboom Basics, but we are just gonna probably take a brief look at it today. Yeah, so I'll add my slides here. So, so the first thing is we're gonna talk about what's in a game. And I see a question in the chat. So I do not work for Replit. I'm a Replit rep. If you want to be a Replit rep, you can check out the page here. And you should be able to apply for the next cohort. But if you want to actually work for Replit, they have a jobs page at the top of their website. Anyways, so what's in a game? So you have like three main things that I'm going to list here. The first thing that you have is code. And that is probably the most challenging bit, is because you have to write the code, write the logic, all of that good stuff. But then you also have, and the code could be written in like Kaboom Js. Like in this instance, we're going to be using Kaboom Js for tutorials. You don't have to submit your game using Kaboom Js. You can use a different game library if you want. But so you have the code, right? And then you also have your sprites. And if you don't know what a sprite is, it's kind of like the images you see, right? So if you're playing Mario, you see the picture of Mario on the screen, and that's a sprite. But then in addition to sprites, you might also have audio, which you don't have to have, but it does add a lot to your game. So this can be in the form of, music that plays throughout the background, or maybe sound effects. And then, so those are kind of the three main things that's in a game. And with Kaboom JS, it's very easy to add all of these. And you even have kind of like a default list of sprites that they give you, which is very helpful. And they have like a sprite editor. We'll get to all that later, though. The second thing I want to talk about is a little bit about pixels. Now, I won't be surprised if a lot of you already know how pixels work. But again, the goal with this jam is for you to build your first ever game. So if you don't know about pixels yet, that's fine, because I'm going to tell you about them. So every screen, if you were to look at a screen, like let's say I took a look at like this little square on the screen, on this like make-believe screen here. If I were to take a look at that, I would kind of see something like this. I would see a bunch of, like little, it would kind of look like a table almost. It has like a bunch of, little boxes within that. And what those are is that's called a pixel. So each of these little boxes here are a pixel. Now, what happens is when this is so small, then to our eyes, we just see like the image, how like it looks like an image, but really it's just a bunch of tiny little boxes. So to give another example, if we were to look at this right here, you might see something similar to this. And you may have seen this type of thing before. Like if you zoom into an image really far, you probably kind of see, where it kind of looks like a bunch of boxes, and those are the pixels. And then if you're to take this and you kind of shrunk it down, you would see we get something similar to the image. Now, I don't know how easily you can see this, but it's not very similar to the original. It still has, you can still see those pixels. And the reason is because your screen has many more pixels than what I am showing here. To give an example, phones often have, I believe, like millions of pixels, and that's just like a tiny, very small screen. So you can imagine how many a larger screen would have. But then, so everything on your screen is made up of these pixels, and these pixels are just light, basically. So, whatever color you want to show. But then within each pixel, you have subpixels. And this is pretty important for game dev, for if you want to make a game, because the way subpixels work, let's say you want to display the color white. Well, to do that, you're going to need to show red, green, and blue. Now, you may be like, hold on, that's not what I see. I see white. But that's what's interesting. So each pixel is actually made up of only 3 colors. But what happens is when it gets so small, to our eyes, we just see 1 color, which is very interesting. Now, let's say you wanted to display the color black. You wouldn't actually see red, green, or blue. Now, the reason for that is because you can change how much each color is on. So you may not want red to be entirely red. You may want it just to be kind of like, 50% brightness, if that makes sense. And with that, you can make millions of colors. I know that sounds unbelievable, but you can. You can make millions of colors with red, blue, and green on a screen. To give a final example of this, if we look at like this kind of pinkish color in the top right of the thing we looked at earlier, it will look something like this. Like if you were to get a camera that can zoom in very far, not like a phone camera, that's not enough, but if you can get your hands on a camera that can zoom in super, super far, you're gonna see something like this. And that's called the subpixel. Now, the reason this is important is because this is how you define colors. So if you're building a game and maybe you want to set the color of a question mark to green, maybe, you're going to need to set red to 0 because you don't want any red to be displayed, green to 255, which means it will be on all the way. So you'll see like all the green that can show. But then blue won't be on at all. And I hope that makes sense. If anybody has any questions throughout, feel free to just drop them in the chat, and I'll take a look at them and try to answer them. But otherwise, again, so feel free to drop questions throughout. I'm going to move on to the next thing, but if you have questions about it, let me know, and I'll try my best to answer them. The next thing that we're going to take a look at is we're going to kind of return to the what's in a game. But now we're going to talk more about what's actually what you see. Because like beforehand, we were talking about kind of the code and stuff. But now we're going to talk about, just very briefly, we're going to talk about kind of what you see in game. So in most games, you'll see like 2 main things that I want to point out. And, there's more patterns you can find. But the 2 main things I want to point out is 1, scenes. So what a scene is you may have a screen like a menu, an in-game screen, a game over screen, things like that. So the menu, would be where you click play or, things like that. And an in-game is when you're actually playing the game. And then game over is when you've lost, and it shows the game over screen. The second thing that you'll kind of see is within each scene, you'll have objects. So you'll have players, enemies, platforms, etc. So players would be you, right? So you can maybe move your arrow keys to move around, so you're the player. And then you have enemies, and those are, similar. They can move around on the screen. And then platforms. What a platform typically is, like this term typically means like something that your player can stand on or something like that. And you can build things like platformers with that. So after that very brief introduction, I want to get to Kaboom Js now. Now, I asked this last time, but we probably have a different audience today. So tell me in the chat, have you used Kaboom before? So is that something that you have some experience with and whatnot? Just because I'm curious, and that way I know how in depth I have to go. So I'll take a look at that in a second. So let's talk about Kaboom Js. So Kaboom Js implements both the things I talked about just now. So we have Kaboom, right? So this is like your overall little world where you have, Mario and, the enemies and all of that good stuff. But then within Kaboom, you have a menu, or I'm sorry, not a menu. Within Kaboom, you have a scene, and this is what we just talked about. And so you can have many different scenes. So here we have menu, game, and lose. And then within each scene, you have objects. So here we have players and enemies, which again, like we just talked about. But then within each of these, you also have components. And this is just how Kaboom works. And it makes it really easy to do this type of thing. So what you can do is kind of give it certain traits almost. So what you can do is specify, like here we're saying it's a body, it's solid, and it's a player. And we'll get to more about what each of these mean shortly. But you can have like each component that kind of tells about each object. And then we also have the same thing here for enemy. And you can have as many of these scenes as you want. So maybe on the lose screen, you want to have text down here that says, game over or something like that. But then in the menu, maybe you'll have like buttons you can click. But that's just kind of an introduction to Kaboom I wanted to look at. And I see we have someone in the chat here who says you just started with Kaboom, but you're hoping to make a Web3 interactive website or game with it. Yeah, so that's really cool. I am fairly new to Kaboom JS, but I can say it is truly fun and easy. Like, I've used it, and you can get a game up and running so quick. So, which is why we're choosing to tell you all about Kaboom JS for this game jam. Let me hop on Replit now, and we're going to take a look at how to get started with Kaboom JS. So you should see my Replit screen now. And how you get started with Kaboom is first, you're going to want to click this Create button. Replit has a template for Kaboom that you can use, so it's super easy. So if you just type in Kaboom, you get all of these options here. So maybe you want to start with Kaboom, which is what we'll be doing, Or maybe you want to do Kaboom Draw, which just gives you kind of ways to draw stuff with Kaboom. And then Kaboom Light, I'm not entirely sure what that is. And then Kaboom Platformer, so we have all of these. We're going to just stick with Kaboom. And now you can give it a name. For those of you who have used Replit before, you are probably experienced with this, but you can give it a name. So maybe we can call it My First Kaboom Game. I'll make it public and create it. And what you'll see first is you're greeted with this little menu off to the left-hand side. And you can see we have the three things we talked about. We have code, sounds, or I'm sorry, I said that backwards. Code, sprites, and sounds. So we have like the three main things that make up the game. And you can see we already have this sprite. It's called Bean. And then you can add more sprites. So maybe I'm making my game. I want another sprite. And I'm like, oh, Mark looks cool. So then I can add Mark to my game. And then we also have the sounds. So you can see we have some sounds here. I don't think you'll be able to hear these if I play them. But there are sounds here that you can pick from. And feel free to be following along if you want. You don't have to. If you prefer just to watch, that's fine too. But now if you click Run, oh, and also you'll see that there's already some code in here. And if you click Run, you'll see what this code does is pop up this right here. And what I recommend doing when you're developing games is go up here to this thing up here that says Web View and click on this little Open in a New Tab button and click on it. Because now you have more screen space to test your game. And then another thing I recommend doing is opening up the Kaboom Js docs. So once you do that, again, for those of you who weren't here last time, these docs just show how you use Kaboom. And what we're going to look for first is I'm thinking we do maybe a bit of a background. Now, how you do a background, because right now you can see it's little squares. So if you want to make this a solid color, how you do that is you go up here to where it says Kaboom on line 4. And if you check out the docs, you can see that you can do this using background. So what you're going to want to do is type these little curly brackets. And then, let me turn off. There we go. I don't want that distracting in the stream. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is type background. And for those of you who have programmed before, you're going to want to put an array. And if you haven't, it's basically just put these little two square brackets. And then inside of here is where you put your red, blue, and green for the subpixels. And hello there. Nice to see you. Okay, so let's say maybe I want to make the background blue. What you do is you specify that the red should be completely off. So it should be 0. The green should be 0 because we want it to be blue. So that means that the blue should be 255. And I'm going to put a little note here that you put the red, green, and blue. And each of those numbers is a number from 0 to 255. So 0 is when the subpixel is completely black. It's completely off. 255 means that the color is completely on. So here we have red off, green off, and blue on. Yeah, feel free to ask some questions in the chat if you have any. So now if we run this, what we should see is a nice blue background. Now, this doesn't look too good, in my personal opinion. You may like it, but I want to go for maybe a more light blue. So what you can do is find a color picker online. Let me zoom in here. So, for example, oh, you won't be able to see that. Okay, let's see here. Sorry for the delay. So if you just go on Google and you type hex color picker, you should see something like this. And I really like this color actually, so I'm just going to go with this. So you can see down here, we have the RGB. And you can see it's 66, 129, 245. And you can actually copy paste that. And if you run it now, you'll see a nice light blue, which I like a lot more. But you can do whatever color you want if you're following along. And also, too, it's worth noting that this train will be posted on the YouTube channel afterwards. So if you'd like to come back to it later, you can. All right, so now let's take a look at how we could add some gravity. Because right now, our bean is just sitting magically in the sky. But bean isn't falling at all. And we want him to fall because we probably want that in our game. So what we can do is here where we add the Sprite. And actually, let me get rid of some of this code just to remove some confusion. Okay. So I'm going to just go through this real quick and summarize. So what this first line does is we import Kaboom. So that just kind of says, hey, I want to use Kaboom for this. And in here, we kind of initialize the Kaboom instance. So if you remove this and you run your game, you're just going to see a white page, and you're actually going to get an error. So we need to initialize Kaboom. And in here, we load the sprite. Remember, a sprite's kind of like an image, so we load this bean here. And then we can add the bean to the page. And so you can put sprite bean, position, which is in pixels, and an area. And what you can do is if you're like, wait, what's area? What does that do? Well, good news for you, because you can go to the docs and find area in the sidebar. And I see it right here. So if you click it, you can see it says generates collider area from shape and enables collision detection. So basically, area turns on collision detection for that shape. If you're new to game development, collision detection is basically when you detect two things that are moving, and then you detect when they hit each other. So this may be helpful if you have like a game and you have like Mario and he's moving along. You don't want him to be able to go below the level. So you check the collision. And that's what that is. But let's say we want him, or let's say we want the bean to fall. Let's just kind of look through the docs here. I believe how we can do that is by putting body here. And that will make it, as we can see here, respond to gravity. So if we just add here body, and then we run our code, you will see here that the bean falls. Right? So every time you run it, it falls. Now, the issue with this is he falls, but then you never see him again. So, to help bean out, we're going to add something where we can detect when you press a key. So what we'll do is when you press the up arrow key, the bean will jump. So let's look through the docs here. And what we're going to want to look for is on key press. So if you look through the docs, you'll see, oh, on key press. And how this works is you can type on key press. And then you type what key you want to detect. So maybe we can do up. And then you can have something happen when you press the up arrow key. So if you type debug log pressed, then when you press an arrow key, you will see, or when you press the up arrow key, you will see that it says pressed. You can't see me clicking the key because my keyboard's down here. But if I click the up arrow key, it says pressed on the screen. And I see we have some questions in the chat. Game Day, glad you're able to join us. I'll be excited to see what you make if you're participating. I'm in the game jam. What programming language should you learn? So in addition to what Danie said in the chat, if you're looking to participate in this game jam, the My First Game Jam, then I recommend using Kaboom Js, which is what we're looking at now. In general, it's kind of up to you though. Yeah, like maybe Python or JavaScript. But if you want to participate in this game jam, I highly recommend Kaboom Js because it's quick and easy to learn and fun. So we have detection for when we press a key. And again, if any of you have questions while I'm doing this, please drop them in the chat and I'll look at them. But otherwise, I'm just going to kind of make something and see what we end up with. We're not going to build an entire game today or anything. I just want to show you the basics of how Kaboom works. So when we press the up arrow key, we want our bean to jump, right? Because we want it to happen where when we play this game, we're able to make the bean jump. So there is a method for that in Kaboom JS. If we look here, let's see here, there should be a jump method somewhere here. Oh, so that's components. I'm not sure where the documentation on jump is. But anyways, the way that we use it is what you want to do is when you add this character, you want to assign it to a variable. So you can say const bean, maybe, and then set it to this. And the reason we would do that is because now we can say, actually, let me add that back. Now we can say bean jump. Now, I'm not sure if this will work because we might have to specify a jump. Oh, it will. So if I press an up arrow key, it makes bean jump. Now, you may not be happy with how far the bean jumps. So what you can do is specify a number here. So like, let's say we say 100,000. and to press the up arrow. Oh, whoops. I believe I did that correctly. Oh, there we go. So if you press an up arrow key, all right, it's not detecting my, oh, there we go. Oh, so 100,000 is clearly quite a bit because he just disappeared from the screen. So let's try 10,000. And you can see he jumps quite a bit. So let's try 1,000. And now you can see he jumps a pretty large amount. Yeah, a very large jump. And yes, thank you, Danie. Variables are like a box. So like Danie said, you can store objects, data, and more. So in this case, what we're doing is we're taking what is returned from this and putting it in a variable. So it would be like if I tell you something, like maybe I give you the number 4, and then you go write down that number and put it inside of like a box or something. That's kind of what a variable is. Now, what else would you like to see? And if there's anything you'd like to see me do with this, let me know in the chat. Because again, today we're just kind of messing around with Kaboom. We're not building an entire game today. Yeah, so maybe we could have a variable to count the jumps. And let's actually do that, just for fun. So if we say let jumps, then this kind of creates a variable called jumps. Okay, collision. I'll get to that in a second then. Thanks, Samuel. So let's say we say let jumps. We can set this to 0. So what this is saying is jumps is equal to 0. For those of you who have done math, like algebra, it's kind of like saying, x equals 2, or, y equals 3. It's kind of the same concept. And I'm going to increase this font size just to make it easier to see. Let me know if the font is too small. But now what you can do is here you can say jumps equals jumps plus 1. So we're doing a bit of math here. So what we're doing is we're doing jumps plus 1. And then we're setting it, we're taking the answer and we're putting it inside our magical box. So now jumps is equal to itself plus 1, if that makes sense. And again, if you guys have any questions, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. But what this will do is add a jump to this variable. So now if we, and let me log this. Well, actually, let me show you. So right now, we're changing the variable. But when I jump, we can't see how many times I've jumped. So what we can do is just say debug log jumps. Debug log, in case I haven't said it already, is a way to show something on the screen. And there's other ways to show text, but it's helpful for when you're testing to just show it on the screen. So you can see here, every time I jump, the number is getting increased by 1. Log max 2. Oh, okay. So let's look at the docs. Just to show you how to use the docs. I'm just going to do Control F. Just to show you guys how to do this again. So what you can do is if you click on this little debug up here, it'll show you everything you can use with that. So I believe you said log max. So, it's right here. Okay, I see. So you put it inside of the, so what you do is you can increase how many logs you can see by doing log max. And now what should happen is you can see 2 logs at once. So maybe I want to see more. Maybe I want to be able to see 10 logs at the same time. It's going to get a little cluttered, but you can see every time I press the key, it increases by 1. So I hope that was helpful. Let's add collisions. Because like Danie said, collisions are so easy with Kaboom. And they really are, though. So I'll show you that. Let me decrease this number just so it's less cluttered. We should be able to add a level. I think we'll do that. Actually, to make it simpler, let's do something else. I'm gonna add a single thing that you can't hit. So what I'm gonna do is over in the Sprites menu, you can click plus. And then you can give this a name. So you can say maybe, let's see, what should we make? I'm gonna just do Mark. There's already a Mark sprite, but I'm gonna make. I'm trying to think of something to make. How about wood? Let's make something called wood. And what you can do, yes, and I believe I showed this earlier, but yeah, you can also do default sprites by doing this. So maybe you can do Mark, and in that, or you can draw. So you can draw here, and maybe make like, oh, you can't see this color picker, but you can select a color, and then maybe you can use the bucket tool to fill the whole thing with that color. So you can do things like this. Let's do Mark just for fun. So what we need to do is say load sprite Mark. And then here you can say sprites.mark.png. So what's happening here is we're saying load sprite, and then the name that we want to give that. So here we're going to name it Mark. You can name this anything you want. Maybe you can say, you can name it anything you want. But then here, this is where your sprite is located at. So when you add a sprite, this is going to be at sprites / and then the name of the file. And then, oh, yes, that's worth noting too. So as Danie said, there's a way, if you go up to these 3 dots on one of these sprites, you can click it and then click Insert Load Code. And it'll add this line to your program. Now, we only need one of these. But let's say I'm like, okay, I just added Mark. Now I want to load it into the game. So what you can do is you click Insert Load Code, and ta-da! Okay. So now let's add Mark to the scene. So we can say add, And then you'll want to add little parentheses and then square brackets. You should be able to find all the brackets above the enter key, usually. If you're having a hard time finding them, they should be there, for the most part. And then you can say Sprite mark. And this says that you want to load the mark sprite. And then you can say POS, which stands for position. And this specifies the position. So maybe we can set an X position of 80 and then a Y position of 100. And if we load this game, we should see that there's a little mark. It's a small mark, but it's mark. And let's actually scale this. You can use the scale function to make it larger. So we can scale it to maybe 3. And now if you load it, mark is larger. Now, if you say area, well, so actually, hold on a second. It's worth noting that bean just goes straight through mark, right? It's almost like mark's a hologram or something. So what you can do is say area. And this should, if I'm correct, okay, I'm not. I'm trying to recall. Feel free to help me out, Danie. I don't remember how to. So we want to make it where bean collides with mark. What we could do is say body, but then mark is going to fall. So they both fall off the screen. Now, so let's try that. So on collide, so let's say const mark equals, so let's put this inside of a variable. And then let's say mark on collide. And now we can say when it collides with something, then we want to do something. Now I'll get to the tag in a second. But for now, just leave it blank, and then I'll show you how to do that. Whoops. So now when mark collides with something, we're going to say collide. However, this is not going to do anything. You can see nothing logs. The reason is because we need to say what it's colliding with. So if we go up here, we can give it a tag, maybe a tag of bean. And then we can use this tag down here. Now you may be like, what is a tag? A tag in Kaboom Js is kind of how you can categorize different characters. So for example, maybe you have enemies. You can give each of those enemies the enemy tag. So now, I believe this should work. Yes. So now it says collide whenever you collide with it. And let's say I come back up here. Enable. Reload. you can see every time I collide with Mark, it says collide. Let's say I fall, collide. Jump up, collide. So it says collide whenever you collide. Yes, and like Danie mentioned, you can group similar objects with things like bean or enemies. Now, let's try adding back. Let's try seeing if we can make bean not fall through Mark. So first we'll need to give Mark the body component. And you'll see they fall at the same time. We can specify a max vel property. Vel stands for velocity. And we can say maybe 200. And you can see Mark is going down quite slowly. So we can change how fast we want something to fall by changing the velocity. So maybe you could say 100. And you can see that Mark now moves down faster. Or if you're feeling rebellious, you can do something like 1,000. And then you'll see that Mark moves quite a bit faster than Bean. If we were to do 10,000, Mark really falls. Now, you could also set max vel to 0. And if we do that, you can see Mark does not move, but Bean does. And I know you can't see this very well, so let's move these sprites down. Let's move these. Let's move their Y position by 20. Actually, that's not going to be enough. Let's you can see Mark and Bean. Let me. Okay, there we go. So you can see Mark and Bean can jump. However, Bean cannot go through Mark. Now, let's say we want to move Bean left and right. So we want Bean to be able to move this direction. We can simply say on key. Actually, I don't think this will. I think this is going to create an issue. I do want to show you that reason. So let's say we say on key press left. Now we can say Bean, I believe we can say move. And we can say negative 100, 0. Maybe, for example. What this will do is move Bean 100 to the left. That's what negative means. It'll move it to the left. But it won't move it in this direction. So it'll just stay still, but it will move this direction, right? So let's take a look at this. But you can see you can't hold down the arrow key. If you hold down the arrow key, he barely moves. And if you keep doing it, eventually he'll fall off Mark, I think. Yeah. The reason is because we don't want to use on key press. On key press only does it when you press the key. If you hold it down, it doesn't work. To fix that, we're going to use on key down. So use down instead of up. Or, I'm sorry, down instead of press. And now we're able to hold down the arrow key. And we can also say, whoa, that's a lot of indentation. And we can also say on key down, right. And then we can have the bean move 100 to the right and 0 in the up and down direction. And now you can see we can move bean in both directions. Something else I will show, probably, is right now you can see bean and mark, but they're kind of very far down on the screen. So what we can do is there's a function called cam position. And what this does is it sets the camera to a certain position. So what we can do is okay. So what we can do is use cam position and if we do this, it'll set the camera positioned to 100, 100. Yes, that's what I plan on doing. Hello. And yes, I am going to make the camera follow bean. So what we'll want to do is every time the game updates, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we use on update. So what we can do is say on update bean. Oops, typo. And I believe every time the bean moves, it should call this right here. It should run this code. So we can say cam position, bean position X, bean position Y. Let me make sure this works before I explain it. Yes, there we go. So what's happening here is every time the bean gets updated, which means every time the bean moves, basically, then we set the camera position to the bean's X position and the bean's Y position. And that lets the camera follow the bean. Now, we will be ending the stream shortly because it's almost been an hour. So if you do have any questions, please drop them in the chat soon. Or anything you would like to see me try with Kaboom. We will be exploring Kaboom more tomorrow as well. But today, I just wanted to give you an introduction. So let's see if there's anything else we can do. Just for fun, there's a function in Kaboom called shake. And what this does is it shakes the screen. So just for fun, let's make it so that every time Mark collides with anything, then we shake the screen. And now you can see every time Mark collides, the screen shakes. And we can adjust the intensity of it. So maybe you want to set the intensity to 100. And that's quite an intense shake. So it shakes the screen. And we can decrease this maybe to like 5. And now it shakes the screen every time you hit Mark. Let's do maybe like 15. All right, last thing we're going to do is we're going to make Mark burp whenever you hit Mark. So you can do that very easily thanks to this function. Yep. So you can make a burp sound effect. I'm not sure what options there are. So you can make a burp sound effect every time you hit Mark. Now, I don't think you will be able to hear this. If you can hear this, tell me. But I don't think my screen is sharing audio. I'll see if I can. Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm able to. Can you hear that? Tell me in the chat if you can hear that or not. Okay. If I share my whole screen, you should be able to hear that now. So now whenever you hit Mark, you can hear the burp sound effect. Last thing I just want to show you that you may find helpful with Kaboom for when you're making your games is you can use debug inspect equals true. And now when you load your game, you'll be able to see all the details. So that's just a note I want to end on because it'll be very helpful. And yeah, you can also change the volume of the burp with, oh, I have an idea. Let's change the volume of the burp to be equal to the number of jumps. Just for fun. Oh, actually, that won't work. Let's divide jumps by like 10. Oh, whoops. I forgot the volume. And now when we load this, every time you hit the mark, it gets louder. Just kind of something fun. So anyways, Are you? Oh, yes, okay. Sorry. Okay. Yeah, maybe Bean can be your favorite animal. Just to remind you guys, for those of you who are just tuning in towards the end, this stream is part of the My First Game Jam, where you can build games, your first ever game, win some hacker plan, have fun. And yeah, like Danie said, maybe Bean can be your favorite animal. Because the theme, again, is favorite animal. So if there's no questions, which it doesn't look like there are, then I'm going to end the stream here. You can also tune in. If you want to see more Kaboom fun, then you can also tune in tomorrow. We'll be having another stream at 2 p.m. PST to talk about more basics with Kaboom Js. So we may have some fun with maybe a platformer or something like that. But that's that. So I will hopefully see you guys tomorrow. Thanks everyone for coming.